Unlimited creativity. Welcome to Sounds Like Portraits. I'm Philippe Ungar. Why this incredible invasion of food on TV, movies, and social networks? I met food stylist Nicole Twohy, whose job is to prepare food for photography, video, and film. She told me that in a time where we're losing a lot of connections between ourselves and the people around us, food remains a constant connector. Obviously, Nicole has a lot of tips and tricks. It sometimes means replacing milk in a cereal bowl with glue. So, what are the hardest food to make look pretty? It's time to listen to her. But before, she told me what she tried to do all her life.
All my life, I've always tried to observe the world around me. I think I'm most inspired by very simplistic forms of beauty. And for me, I'm inspired by that. I'm also very calmed by that. Looking at something beautiful and lovely and simple, it calms a lot of my anxieties. And for me, being able to create beautiful things, it serves a similar function in my life.
We're going to talk about food styling, but it's impossible to ignore the incredible invasion of food on TV, on social media. And I saw today an article in the New York Times whose title is How to Make the Egg Salad Sandwich That Drew Eyes on Instagram. So are we all becoming food stylists?
I saw that article as well. And you're right. I think food is so trendy right now, which is funny to say because it's such a basic, universal thing. It's funny to me because as humans, we've been feeding ourselves since the beginning of time. It's the most basic thing we can do is seek food and feed ourselves. And before we had the ability to order that food or have other people feed us, we had to do it ourselves. So cooking is a really basic skill, and it doesn't have to be tricky or challenging at all. No matter where you live and your circumstances, we all have to eat, and I think we all appreciate food that tastes good. And so in a time where I think we're losing a lot of connections between ourselves and the people around us, food remains a constant connector and a constant source of inspiration. And I really do love seeing that.
What is food styling about? Tell me everything.
So food styling is about, just basically when I tell people what I do and they look at me like, that's a job, I say that I cook and prepare food for photography and commercials and videos. So as a profession, this involves the shopping and sourcing of the food, which just like you would imagine with a chef, those initial ingredients are a huge part of the success of the final outcome. So a large part of the job of a food stylist is knowing where to find things, what to look for, and how to secure the most, iconic looking strawberry or the most, beautiful example of something you're working with or an obscure food item and how to find it. And then it's also the preparation of that food. So there's a lot of intimate knowledge of cooking that goes into the job. And then, the last part of that, you source the food, you cook the food, and then you style it for camera. And this is different than if you're just serving it at a restaurant. There are ways that things need to look for camera, for the lighting of a studio, to capture the sense really well in a photograph that might not necessarily be true in the in-person dynamic. So those are the different components of food styling. But really at its basic, it's making food look as beautiful and desirable as it can be.
Personally, how did you come to food styling?
So I remember I was in my mid-20s and I was in that marketing role. I was very unhappy. I was, kind of the traditional education university, started climbing the American corporate ladder, and it was just really not right for me. And I could feel a lot of friction there. And I remember just looking for sources of inspiration. And I think I was flipping through a Crate and Barrel Christmas catalog. And suddenly it dawned on me for the first time, wait a minute, this is somebody's job to create these beautiful Christmas homes, probably months ago, and live in this world and tell this story through these images so that, people will see it and get inspired and excited about it. And I mentioned that to my now mother-in-law, though she was just my boyfriend's mother at that time, who is a former chef herself. And she said, that's a job for food too. I had just never thought about it before. Our entire lives were inundated with photographs of food. You go to a grocery store and almost all of the packaging that you see has some food imagery on it. You watch TV commercials, even just watching movies, there's, food scenes, families around the dinner table. And this is just something that we witness all the time. And I had never stepped back to realize, it's somebody's job to put that food on the table. It's somebody's job, to have this perfect bowl of cereal on that cereal box. And once I learned that, it really just totally sparked something within me. It seemed to completely blend some of my favorite of things to do, things I felt passionate about, and things that are just inherently traits I want to foster. It was kind of, when I learned about food styling, it felt like it was cooking meets arts and crafts, and that was kind of my perfect balance right there.
Do you ever alter the recipe to make the dish more appetizing? Sometimes, serving a sauce on the side or adding something else.
Yeah, depending on what you're shooting, there are abilities to do that or not. There are often, if you're cooking a recipe for a cookbook, for a website, a food blog, you do often want to stick to the recipe so that people know that what they're looking at is achievable based on the ingredients that are listed and what you're asking them to do if they follow it. So with that, we tend to not alter things too much. Although, again, referencing specifically to how make things look great on camera, it's not uncommon when food styling that you would finish something with a spritz of water or a brush of oil to make it glisten. Anything that denotes freshness, that denotes food that's really delicious and warm and moist. Those are all things that you can kind of enhance when food styling to bring out those qualities in a dish.
Sometimes do you change the ingredients to make a better picture, like putting glue instead of milk in a cereal bowl, for example?
Yeah, I think these are the things that people think of when they think of food styling, and it is kind of fun. I will say that there are some things in food styling that remain best to fake. The glue in place of milk for cereal is sometimes an approach that is used. There's other things that can substitute for milk too, but the challenge is if you need to spend a couple hours with a hero bowl of cereal on set, placing in with tweezers your cereal flakes, you can't have something that has the liquid content of milk. They're going to sink down into it. They're going to get soggy. So that's where you actually get to be kind of creative and problem solve about what you can put in place of that. So that's one thing. And another one that is often faked would be ice cream. Now, if you're shooting ice cream for an ice cream company, for Haagen-Dazs, you're using the real product. There's truth in advertising laws, and that's just the way of course, the client wants their own actual food to be shown. But if you're shooting something else that has nothing to do with ice cream, but the ice cream is making an appearance in the shoot, again, if that's sitting on a set under hot lights for an extended period of time, it's just going to melt. So that's another thing that often gets faked as well. Though current trends in food styling and photography definitely are leaning more towards the organic, the natural, the homemade, the approachable. And when I say organic and natural, I mean less in terms of, the certified organic, the quality of food, and more in terms of the style of it. So, you don't want everything to be perfect. The phrase that comes up just constantly on almost every shoot I'm on is perfectly imperfect. That's what everyone seems to be striving for these days. So if it's too perfect, it doesn't look
appetizing.
Yeah, you don't want to dive into something that is so pristine that you're afraid to approach it. It has to look approachable, and to be delicious, it needs to look approachable. So there's a lot of scattering of crumbs or loose garnishing with herbs that are cascading off the plate, this type of look. So in current food styling, I think you see less of the artificial faking of products than maybe, you at one time you used to. And today it's okay if things are looking a little bit messier and more real.
Did you experience some incidents like the ice melting or something else? How did you react?
With every job, there's their own challenges. It's one of the things I love about what I do. Every job is different. You never know what you're going to be working on that day, that week, and what challenges are going to come from that. So, inherent in this role is being a problem solver, which is one of the things that attracts me to it. And I think the success in that goes with understanding how food is going to react and what you can do when something is going wrong. I always like to have food be as real as possible and shoot it as quickly as possible so that it can just have this, food has a moment in time when it looks the best and it's the most natural in its appearance, when it hasn't been fussed over, when it hasn't been on set for too long that we've been tweezing it and brushing it and working with it. So if we can get something, in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour of it being on set, that's great. After that, things do often start to change. You need to reset things.
Ideally, what do you expect from your work with the photographer?
So the dynamic with the photographer and the food stylist is a very close one. I think oftentimes people, when I tell them I'm a food stylist, they assume I also take the photos. And it would be great if I did. I don't have that
Why not?
photographic talent. I'm not trained in photography, which is just such a specific skill. And within the world of photography, food photography is such a specific skill. I work with all sorts of photographers, and there are, a group of photographers who really just specialize in food photography, and you can see why. They know how to light for food. They know how to capture food. It's just like any other subject that people really know how to get to the essence of. Food photographers know, how to speak to the essence of food in their photographs. So it's a constant balance with the food stylist of working in tandem and knowing when everything is ready, having a stand-in on set so that they can get the lighting right, and then knowing when you're going to bring in the beauty, the hero item, and working together to achieve the goal, the common goal, and knowing what you're trying to express with whatever dish you're shooting.
What are the hardest foods to make look pretty?
Hot dogs.
Really?
Hot dogs and sausages can just be inherently tough to style. I think it has such a odd look to it. It's an iconic item, and often you're doing a perfect ketchup drizzle, or adding your garnishes onto it, but it's just kind of a funny item to work with. Another one that's tricky are sandwiches. Sandwiches you're also needing to often shoot into so you can see the layers. So they're not something that you're able to capture very well from an overhead angle or from a higher angle. So you get down low, you look into the sandwich, and then you need to build these layers where everything is distinct and everything is having its moment. So the lettuce is looking curly and crispy. Let's say the sliced turkey or ham is looking juicy and is curled just so and is all layered together, and the tomato slices are shingled in the right way. And as you build a sandwich, ultimately, the weight of everything presses down on itself. And so the top of the sandwich can tend to look like it has more space and levity to it than the bottom layers do, which over time can look pressed down. So that one just involves a little bit, more tricks sometimes of propping things up, of pinning things in, of having things that you can't see to camera that, doing some legwork in the background to hold up your different layers. But that can be a challenging one.
What are your tips and tricks about the hot dog?
Well, specifically for that one, I don't know how many hot dogs everyone has cooked, but there's a lot of different ways you can cook a hot dog. And if you're shooting it for photography, if you were to grill a hot dog like you would to eat it at your backyard barbecue and then put that under the camera, you're going to notice that it's completely wrinkled. It's going to be looking a little dry, a little shriveled, and maybe there's some, nice browning or grill marks on it, but they're going to be messy and they're going to be kind of all over the place. It's going to look like a mess. So for something like that, instead of grilling it, you would probably gently steam it so that it has the appearance of looking more cooked and more plump and more moist and juicy. And then you would individually place on the grill marks with either a hot skewer or with a charcoal starter that's been heated up to be very hot. So you're individually making those markings. You know exactly where they're going to go, you know the spacing between them, and you can do that without applying additional heat or cooking to the hot dog itself. So it isn't going to dry out or it isn't going to wrinkle in the same kind of way.
What about the drinks? Because you're styling drinks too.
Yeah, drinks are a whole other technique, and it really varies based on what type of drink you're doing.
So I guess it's about cocktails more than everything else.
Yeah, so if you think about a cocktail, again, it's like what makes for the most incredible looking cocktail. If you see something and it really makes you excited to try it, it's going to be something that looks refreshing, something that looks interesting, that looks iconic. So oftentimes we would achieve this if you think of something that's refreshing. So maybe you're telling the story of it's a hot day in the summer and you want this great tropical cocktail. So what do you want? You want something that's cold. So how do you denote cold in photography? Well, one of the things we look for, as consumers is condensation. So we want the glass to look dewy. We want to see that it's kind of has that frosty look to it. You think about being in a really hot, humid New York summer day, and the idea of like a frosty, delicious cocktail is such a story to sell. It's so exciting. And so we might spritz the glass. We might, to get glasses to look frosty, if you were doing this at home, you could stick them in your freezer, store them there, pull them out, pour your drink in it, and now you have this really great glass. Again, that doesn't really last very long on set, or once you touch that with your hand, it's marked and it's over. So to fake this, there's different types of things that you can spray onto the glass to make it look frosty, or things you can spray onto it to give yourself dewdrops and condensations that's going to hold for the length of time you need to shoot it.
Is it a more creative process to work on drinks than food in general?
I think they're probably equally creative. I think it really comes, the creativity in food styling, whether it's with food or drinks, I think comes from understanding the message you're trying to communicate. Food styling really is a form of marketing, of food marketing. So you're telling a story with your food and you're trying to, or your drinks, and you're trying to get people to feel a certain way. For me, food and drinks are very emotionally tied. I have a strong emotional connection with the experience of eating and of food. And I think that's what I try to achieve when I'm styling is stepping back and asking, what type of emotion am I trying to elicit here? And then the creativity comes in, and how can you achieve that?
Food styling is about composition. Do you have guidelines to create your composition?
Food styling is definitely about composition. Absolutely. I think a lot of it is just a sense of knowing when something looks better than a previous version of it, or how something looks best, or looking at an image and saying, that's not right. I need to move, this food to this part of the plate, or I need to build a little bit more texture in this part of the dish, because it's just not singing. It's just not saying what I want it to.
How would you describe your personal style in food styling?
I do like to work on projects that are kind of quirky. I really love creating things with food that are not generally edible. My projects that I really enjoy doing, for instance, a couple of years ago, I had a project for the email marketing company MailChimp. What I got to do, my part of it, was to create the movie poster for this that involved creating a life-size dog out of kale. And I remember when I first got the brief for this and we were initially discussing it, I was so on board. This is right up my alley. I love kale and I love dogs and I love this type of food styling. I thought, you've really asked the right person to do this. But they were really specific. They didn't want something in the form of a dog. They didn't want it to be like stuffed animal or cutesy. And they really wanted it to be a mid-size, think of golden retriever dog out of kale. So it really was. It was that size. It came up, to about my knees, and it was a couple feet long. And I worked with a great prop stylist on that, who worked with a model maker who actually created the internal kind of core of what I built around with the kale to make the dog. That type of work where you're really getting playful and out of the box is what I love doing.
Most of the time, you're working on edible dishes.
That's right. Yeah.
And the question is, at the end of the day, can you eat it?
Hopefully you can. Yeah. So, something I think everyone in the food industry is aware of right now more than ever is the concept of food waste and trying to be really conscious of not producing waste when we can. And unfortunately, part of food photo shoots, there's a lot of product that comes onto set. So when I'm shopping for a job, I can't just buy the exact amount that a recipe calls for that I think I'll need, because if I'm trying to find the most perfect hero strawberry and I just need to show one on the front of a granola bar packaging, but just buying 1 quart of strawberries at the grocery store, I'm probably not going to find that one. So there's a lot of sorting and food that comes onto a shoot. And so the goal is to always make sure at the end of the shoot it's still edible. So the crew can all take it home so that it can get donated. And if you're creating, a beautiful recipe on the set, ideally you're able to send that home with someone too. So on a lot of food shoots, especially if you're working on a cookbook or working for a magazine, these are the shoots that move really fast. You're maybe making, 10 to 14 recipes a day. And if you think about that, in a 10-hour shoot, cooking 10 to 14 full recipes, you're just constantly slinging out food. You're in there one thing after the next. So this is the type of food that doesn't really have a chance to be faked. You don't have time to fuss with it. It's not even on set long enough where potentially it could become inedible or unsafe to eat after a period of time. So those are shoots, and those often are really the most beautiful, delicious kinds of food sometimes too, that, it's not uncommon that the food we shoot during the day, we end up having for lunch as a crew that day, or people take things home and they become dinner. So yeah, we try for that, because it would be a real shame if this beautiful food ends up not being able to be consumed in the end.
I'm gonna leave the room. Please hold the microphone and add whatever you want to the interview.
With the world of food and being inundated by food imagery and recipes like we are, I think sometimes it can be really intimidating for people to create something, to create a dish that they want to serve to those they love and to their friends. And I would love to, just be able to take the pressure off of people, and any amount of thoughtfulness, just taking that step back and thinking about something you might want to cook and to create, and just having fun with it and allowing people to experience, your point of view through your food. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be fussed over. It doesn't have to look like it looks in the magazines. That's why this is a job. There are people who are trained to do this, and bringing people together around it and being able to express beauty through what you eat and what you serve to others.
Thank you, Nicole Twohy, for sharing your story. It was Sounds Like Portraits, a podcast by Philippe Ungar. Music, Charmeuse de Serpent, composed and conducted by Olivier Glisson. See you soon for the next episode.